So my name is Georg Frank. I'm a biologist here in the Donau National Park, and I'm also responsible for transnational cooperation within this Danube Parks network, where we bring together the know-how and experiences from protected areas along the Danube. And here at the moment we are in the National Park Visitor Center Nationalparkhaus Lobau. So that's somehow the gate for all people living here in Vienna to the national park. We have here the big city and we have here the national park with wild nature, with more or less intact river ecosystems, and that is what we want to offer to all the people here. We want to invite them to come here, to learn here in the Visitor Center something about the national park, and then to go there, to go for recreation, to enjoy the nature, but also to accept the nature and to learn about the natural ecosystems. So approximately in our national park we have 1.5 to 2 million visitors in all. So as I told you, most of them come for recreation. They come for swimming, for walking, for biking. Then we have approximately 100,000 visitors, which really comes exclusively to use offers from the national park. That means programs for school people, that means boat tours, that means special offers for, to learn more about nature. And then we have approximately 50 to 60,000 visitors which come only by bike and use this main Eurovelo. And this is a very international group of visitors. This flag shows the logo of the Donau National Park, and our slogan is Kostbare Natur für Generationen. That means valuable nature for generations. And I think that's a very good slogan, because what we try to do here is to preserve this nature, but not only for the birds and for the plants, but of course also for the people, because they are using this area and they should more and more learn about the importance of this nature. And so we are now in the village of Schönau, a small village but not so far from Vienna. And the best way to explore this region of the national park is of course by bicycle, because it's, as we can see on the map, we came from Vienna. It's not far from Vienna here in Schönau, but you have this Eurovelo number 6, where you can come on this flood prevention dike. You can pass the national park, and it's just, let's say 1 hour from Vienna, and then you can enjoy this very beautiful area of our national park. We want to have to come with their bicycles. We want to come here for enjoying nature and swimming in sidearms, but we don't want to have them to take the flowers with them. We don't want to have them to make the firewood. We want to have them to camp only on the sites where it's allowed. So you see, we try to balance it to have areas as core zones for nature, for our flagship species like white-tailed eagle or this little-ringed plover breeding on gravel banks, for example. But of course we also want to have areas where the people should come. We are really happy if they come and enjoy nature and see the values. And that's a task which is, as we have already discussed, not easy, because we are the green band between Vienna and Bratislava. We have these wetlands, very rich in biodiversity. We have this flood prevention dike, which was erected to protect this area against floodings, but today it has developed to quite a valuable dry habitat, dry grasslands. Here that's the main cyclist connection in this direction to Vienna. So it takes 30 minutes, 1 to 1 hour, and then you are in Vienna. So here, as I told you, 60,000 cyclists per year comes this route and brings them to the heart of our national park. On the other hand, if you turn to the other side, you see this sign which shows cycling not allowed here, because on the one hand we want to attract this soft tourism to come the people here. On the other hand, of course, we have also the obligation and the responsibility to define areas where we don't want to have so many people. And here it's one area which is on the one hand very valuable for nature conservation. On the other hand, we have some, calm hiking trails here, and we also see sometimes conflicts between the people who wants to go for hiking and walking and with cyclists. So it's difficult to balance it, but we do the best what we can do to make it good for nature conservation and to make it good for these people coming here for recreation and exploring the nature. So National Park was established 20 years ago, mainly on public land. So it was established on the land owned by and managed by the city of Vienna. And here we are now in Lower Austria already, the region of Lower Austria. It was established on the land from the state forestry, which is managed by the state forestry. The private landowners, they weren't so much interested to include it into the national park. So here, for example, it's private land. We're still not in the national park now, we're just walking in this direction. Danube floodplains are famous to be the hotspots of biodiversity. An intact river serves and delivers many different habitats close together. So we have the river, we have the wetlands, we have the sidearms, we have forest, but we also have dry grasslands. And this mix of habitats so close together creates an enormous biodiversity. So you cannot find a single place in Central Europe with such a biodiversity which is so rich than our Danube floodplains. So they are really very valuable. If you look to insects, then it's an enormous biodiversity. I'm an ornithologist, so birds, you can find such a large range of different species. So we definitely have a very, very big responsibility to protect these areas as hotspots for biodiversity. We came by foot this way, and we are now on the flood prevention dike, which separates our floodplains into a very dynamic floodplain. So each flood is changing this area very strongly into this more stable floodplain, which is dominated by these reed belts, but also very rich in biodiversity. And I also want to stress that there are some swimming, let's call it wild swimming places. So we definitely want to have the people coming to the natural places and to see. And dynamic river creates very nice places. You have these wonderful gravel banks there. You have these willows. You can sit there like in the Caribbean Sea to go for swimming. So that's even possible in a strictly protected reserve. It's not allowed everywhere. So if you go here, you will not find a swimming place here, because here it's a core zone. So as I said, we want to balance it, and it's not always easy, but yeah, we hope that it will be in a good way.
So the green route is for bicycles, yeah, or the red?
The red route is for bicycles. So here it's a hiking route, so it's exclusively for tourists who comes by foot and wants to explore the nature by foot walk. And of course it's also possible then by foot to go here and to go to these swimming places. But we're not very happy to have the cyclists then on these roads, which are exclusively for the for the walking people. But you will see it's a quite a narrow path, so it's even not attractive for the cyclists. As I told you, the national park is a strictly protected area, so it's not allowed to go there by car, and it's not allowed to go there for everybody by truck or whatever. If you come here by car, by private car, yeah, you will get problems. So basically it is accepted, we don't have the big problems with that. So I'm sure that it's a car driving slowly, because there is a strict speed limit, and I'm sure it's, on the one hand, it could be one of our rangers, it could be an exception for car driving for scientists coming, for example, for big studies. It could be water management, or it could be forestry. There is no forestry in the national park, but the forest administrations are taking care on the roads, on the trails. And we see it's a car controlling, I think, coming from the Vienna waters and controlling the, it's written on it, Wien Wasser, that means Vienna waters. So as I told, it's a very important drinking water reservoir for Vienna, and of course they have to maintain it, to control it, if all is in good conditions.
Can you tell us something about that drinking reservoir? Like, we know you get the most of the water for Vienna from Alps, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But
so Vienna is very famous to have brilliant drinking water which comes from the Alps. There's this Wiener Hochquellwasserleitung, a very famous pipeline providing perfect drinking water to Vienna. But there is also a big reservoir here in the floodplains. For example, in Bratislava, they get most of the drinking water out of the Danube floodplains. So that's definitely a big reservoir, and a very important one, which can be of even higher importance in the future, as we all know. So it's a good example, I would say, that these floodplains have really multiple functions and drinking water reservoir can be, and is in this case, is one of them. National Park Category 2 is really a strict level of protection. That means no commercial land use anymore. This includes, of course, also building infrastructure. So no infrastructure erections are possible here anymore. On the one hand, that's of course a good thing, because we can enjoy the nature here without any how to say, bad impacts. On the other hand, of course, we have to be realistic. It's a limit. It's limiting somehow some developments. So, for example, there are plans to build highways around Vienna, and now we have a national park which is limiting that. And there are big discussions. How can we overcome this? If the road has to be built, a bridge is not possible. So there are even discussions to build a tunnel under the national park, which is of course very costly. So of course a protected area means then really strict regulations. The national park gets 50% of the financing by the ministry and 25% by the governments from Lower Austria and Vienna. So it's a public institution, the national park, and is mainly financed by public money. For the entrance is for free. Maybe one sentence to the history of the national park. So it was established 21 years ago as a result of the discussion to build a hydropower plant or to establish a national park. And finally the decision was to have a national park established in this area. There were plans to have quite a big national park covering the floodplain forest along the Danube, covering the floodplains along the Morava River, this is the border river to Slovakia, and the Thaya River, which was at the end not realistic and not done, unfortunately, on the one hand. So it was established on the public land along the Danube. That's really a footpath where you can enjoy nature on a small path and a small trail, which is of course very attractive for visitors. And because in this time, so more than 100 years ago, the Danube was regulated. It was a very wild river since this time. And then the embankment from the Danube started. Yeah. And it was logical in this time because there were problems with flooding. Yeah. They wanted to develop the Danube for navigation. So it was logical to channelize it a little, to regulate it. But now it's national park, and we would like to see it in a very dynamic way, or at least in a more dynamic way. So river restoration is one of our main focus here. And here with fundings from the EU LIFE program, a big restoration project took place to dynamicize this side arm. So we opened this side arm again with the Danube, we reconnected, and then very dynamic river processes can take place again, and this creates very valuable habitats like gravel banks, like sandbars, like steep river banks. So, and this is the small rest of this embankments which we were not able to remove. So it's black stork, quite a rare bird, very rare breeding bird in our area. But as I told you, that's really a wonderful place, very rich in biodiversity. We have the Danube, we have this very dynamic river habitats with these gravel banks with very rare breeding birds. We have these dynamic floodplain forests, and on the other side we have these reed belts, these wetlands. So here we really have a richness of habitats very close together, and the result of course we see in this rich of biodiversity as well. Now the black stork is coming again. Yeah. Oh, very nice. And what you can hear, feel and see is that we are really here in a core zone of the national park, in a very valuable area. But you hear the aeroplanes coming from the Viennese airport. So of course you can see and feel it that we are not at the end of nowhere in the wilderness of, I don't know, in Siberia. We are here in a core zone of a national park between the big cities, including highways very close to the national park, including airports very close to the national park, including big city developments. That's the compromise of our national park. So I'm really interested where this bird flies, because now it's breeding season. If there would be two, okay, I would say maybe they're not breeding. But if there's only one, the chance is quite high that one parent bird is sitting on the nest and the other one is going for feeding. On the other side you see more or less a natural river bank, and here you see the Danube was embanked 100 years ago, or more than 100 years ago, to improve the conditions for navigation, to avoid big flooding events on this side. So this is an infrastructure which was logical in this time, which is still needed today. But together with the waterway administrations, we also try to find out a way how we can manage the river in a more sustainable way. And there's also a small but important contribution to flood protection, because what we have learned that these protected areas serve also as an important reservoir during flood events, because here we are happy if the flood is coming and is covering the area. That's good for nature, and it's a good flood protection activity for all cities and municipalities downstream. The Austrian Danube section is a chain of hydropower plants, and we have only 2 river sections left which are not dammed, and one of them is our national park. So that's still a free-flowing river. As you see, it's a free-flowing river, and the river has to flow. A river has to be dynamic to develop all this diversity. And this is the result of a big campaign in the 80s, because it was the time when the plan was also to build a hydropower plant in Hamburg, which is a municipality on the Slovakian border. And it was clear this hydropower plant will be planned. It was the decision by the government. But finally a green movement started in Austria. Thousands of people came to the area, many students, all generations came and were camping in winter in the floodplains and decided, no, we don't want to continue with this economic development. Okay, we want to continue with this development as well, but it should not be on cost of this last rests of nature. And so there were big protests, a big campaign, a strong discussion process in Austria, which way to go, building this big hydropower plant or establishing a national park. And finally the decision was, as we know today, we hope a good decision to establish a national park, and that was really a turnaround in the general visions of Austria to decide, okay, also this protection of nature, this providing this nature for the people here and for generations, as our slogan shows, has also been one of the priorities. So our national park is not only a protected area for this on local level, it's really a symbol for nature conservation in Austria. Let's call it traditional fish houses. Basically they were built for fishing, for typical type of fishing, so to bring down the net, yes, and then to bring them up again.
No, there is not.
And exactly, it's visible from here. And when the national park was established, there was a discussion: can this be accepted in a national park, yes or no? And finally, the decision by this IUCN, by this World Conservation Society, was it can be accepted as a traditional land use of the local people here. So it is accepted. They can still come here for doing their fishing.
But they can't build new, or they can build a new traditional
The
house?
number of fishermen houses like this is decreasing, because they're not allowed to build new ones. It's strictly regulated. We are offering somehow a little piece of wilderness. So we are close to Vienna, and if you come here, then you have a footpath, a trail, like going uphill, going downhill. That's not because we are lazy, that's because we think that's the good right of all people visiting us to have this nature experience, to see that there is still some places in this region where natural developments can go on. That includes, of course, a forest which is not clear and maintained. You see a lot of dead wood, for example. That's part of these natural processes. Here the trees have the right to live and have the right to die. So that's the main vision of our national park, to have a free development, a more or less natural development of the nature. We have an important laboratory at field. So there are the big universities in Vienna, and the Donau National Park is one of the most important spots for them to go here to make surveys, to make monitoring programs on a natural floodplain forest. So what you see here, to my opinion, and to the opinion to many of our visitors, this is not wasted land, this is not wasted wood, because of course it could be used for energy production, for firewood, and that would make sense. But it's also important to have areas where this dead wood is accepted as an important part of the land, as an important piece of structure, very suitable for dead wood beetles, for insects, for woodpeckers, and just to feel what nature can do. So we need, of course, areas where land is cultivated for production, for recreation. But I think as important it is to have at least some areas where these natural developments, deadwood, river dynamics, floodings coming and going, are still visible, are still viable, are still going on and can be still seen and observed by scientists, but also by local people and by everybody from us.
Evo nas na Dunavskom nasipu u blizini Beča. U pitanju je nasip koji se koristi samo kao biciklistička staza. On povezuje Beč i Bratislavu. Ovde se mogu vidjeti na desetine, ako ne i na stotine biciklista svaki dan, i to je ono što bismo mi da uradimo sa Savskim nasipom, da se on zatvori za saobraćaj i da bude samo za saobraćaj bicikala. Kao što vidite, on privlači veliki broj turista, ovde ima dosta pansiona, restorana i svi ti ljudi ostavljaju novac u ovoj zemlji i to je ono što je korist svih nas. Tu bi ljudi mogli da se rekreiraju, a ovako imamo samo 300 ljudi koji su uzurpirali obalu, napravili vikendice i samo oni maltene koriste taj resurs umesto svih nas.
Where are you coming from?
From Düsseldorf.
So you're traveling from Düsseldorf?
Yeah.
By bikes?
By bikes. Düsseldorf, France, Strasbourg, Basel, Konstanz, Donau-Eschingen, Ulm, Regensburg. What was next?
Where are you going?
To Budapest.
To Budapest?
Yeah.
When you started?
We started May 1st, but we haven't been biking every day. We've been taking, like, you spent 3 days in Strasbourg and in Basel, in Konstanz, so we could, enjoy, explore, look around.
Can you tell me just which date is it today?
Today, I think it's the 14th.
14th of June. So
Yeah.
1 month and a half you're on the trip.
Yeah.
And is it hard? For the lady, for you?
We had some hard days. We had, like, today is fantastic. This was just perfect. But every once in a while we hit some very confusing signs. Bikes trail goes this way, that way. Which one should we take? We're never quite sure. And then after Strasbourg, there was a big storm. We just missed. We arrived to the hotel in a big storm, and next day it was a 80 kilometers gravel trail, and the mud, and it was really hard. So it's ups and downs, but that's part of the challenge.
What would be advice for someone who thinks about something similar? What not to forget?
Well, don't wait until you're 79 years old. Otherwise, but if you do, it's still good.
Do you have any advice for someone who thinks about this?
Don't do it.
Why?
No, it's fun, but I think you better do a lot of training before. So,
But
for young people, it's fine, yeah. But we're too old. We're old.
what is the most important thing to bring with you on such a kind of trip?
Money.
So welcome now in our main visitor center. That's now the National Park Visitor Center in Ort. It's in the castle of Ort. It includes our offices, it includes the headquarters, and it includes the museum of the municipality, as well as the indoor and outdoor exhibition of our national park. So we are now here in the square of our visitor center, and here you see this monument of the big Danube Sturgeon of the Huso, a huge fish, which was quite common here in our Danube section as well. It was sold at the fish market in Vienna, but it got lost now because it's not possible anymore for this fish to migrate upstream from the Danube, coming from the Black Sea, upstream to crossing Serbia, for example, and coming to Austria, because this migration route is stopped, so it's not possible anymore to have them. But we installed at least this monument, and the same monument you can find also in the Danube Delta, because at least in the brain of our visitors we want to show them to protect the Danube here is fine, but it is one interrelated ecosystem, and for the conservation we have to cooperate all together. So we need strong protected area administrations, we need experts there working for nature conservation, and we are aware that, or we are sure that with a cooperation all along the Danube we can raise the efficiency of each single protected area, and maybe that's the only way to bring together all the know-how and all the experiences from all along the Danube. At the moment we are 20 protected areas, with all Danube countries are part of this network, including of course also Serbia, with some very, very valuable protected areas there and playing a very good role there. One of the main migration barriers is the Čerdap hydropower plant. There are big efforts going on to find solutions to make it possible, this migration. It's not easy, but we really hope that a solution will be found. It would be definitely an enrichment if this fish will come back again to the Austrian section of the Danube. They have to migrate to Black Sea downstream, and even this downstream migration does not exist, so they will go to the turbines and so that's it's not possible
they
at the moment.
They just go downstream and like...
No vision, no possibility to come down, but the big problem is that these huge fish they can be very old. So the last fish which are trying to cross Čerdap they were still migrating to our region, but they one after the other will extinct. And we are not sure if we lose these huge animals which were migrating to Austria, if we are losing them, if we still have individuals who knows the behavior to migrate. So you're totally right, maybe we have to bring youngs upstream to adapt them to this region. If they migrate downstream again, that they have this behavior and knows when the Čerdap is open, maybe then they have the chance to go upstream. And now we are here in the outdoor exhibition, we call it Schlossinsel, and that's somehow the door to the floodplain. Here the visitors can see animals which they hardly see at the floodplains because they are very rare or very shy, and so we want to show them the secret values of our floodplains. We want to attract them to go to the floodplains and look carefully there what they could see, and so it's somehow a motivation outdoor area for the people to really visit the floodplains and to see the values of it. It's also an important area for us for recultivation of some plants. For example, here a very rare plant, it's the Typha minima. It's a symbol plant for dynamic rivers. Because of river regulation, it extinct in Austria more or less. There are only very, very few places left where this plant still occurs. And now we want to recultivate them here in the outdoor area of our visitor center.
Šťuka! On chce vidieť šťuku?
10 kilos, huh? 10 kilos, minimum.
I don't know, but I think one of the responsibilities of a national park is also to show that nature is not always only nice and beautiful. Sometimes nature does things which we maybe do not want to have or which we do not want to accept. For example, one of the main pulls of our national park is the flooding. The Danube comes with big floods, destroys everything, destroys animals, destroys habitats, kills trees, but at the end more natural habitats come up. So this river dynamics is very, very important. And another way of dynamics, if you want to interpret it like that, is of course the dynamics of living and dying. And here you see a carcass of one of our animals which lives here in the floodplain. It died. It was not killed by the national park, but it died. Most probably it was an accident on the road. But we brought it here, and it's a little bit away from the mainstream in the visitor center. But we invite all people, all visitors, to come here and to realize that nature also creates biodiversity because of dying, like deadwood, for example, and dying animals. And that's also part of biodiversity. That's also part of natural processes. And there would be very, very interesting stories to tell you about these insects feeding on this carcass. How to find they come from many kilometers to find this. They have a very special behavior to reproduce on these dead animals. So that's really an interesting story which we want to tell with this. Not all people like it, but we think that is also an important part of nature. And as I said, not all in nature what we want to preserve is nice and beautiful. Sometimes we also have accept things which are maybe not so beautiful, but also part of this process and an interesting and valuable part of this process. And one specific thing along the Danube is that very often we have these valuable floodplain forests and valuable floodplain areas close to this big metropolis, to these big cities. For example, here our national park is located between Vienna and Bratislava, and we are preserving it. We have the Danube National Park, for example, in close to Budapest. Or we have, for example, Petrovaradinski Ried close to Novi Sad. And so there are very good examples how to deal with big cities and nature reserves. And maybe that could be an interesting option for Belgrade as well.